Let me give you a number that should keep every Pentagon strategist awake at night. In 2023, China launched more naval tonnage in a single year than the entire active fleet of the British Royal Navy. Not over a decade. Not as a wartime surge. In one calendar year, during peacetime, almost as an afterthought. And here is the part that really stings. The United States, the country that built the Navy that won World War II, that constructed over 6,000 ships between 1941 and 1945, now struggles to maintain a fleet of 291 combat vessels. China is not just outbuilding America. It is outbuilding America at a ratio that the Department of Defense itself has called, and I am quoting directly, a strategic risk of the highest order. So how did this happen? How did the nation that invented modern aircraft carriers, nuclear submarines, and precision-guided naval warfare fall so far behind in the simple act of putting ships in water? Most people think this is about budgets. They think if Congress just wrote a bigger check, the problem would disappear. But here is what that crowd gets completely wrong. This is not a funding crisis. This is an ecosystem crisis. And there are three systems driving China's shipbuilding dominance that almost no Western analyst is talking about honestly. The first system is what I call the Cascade Model. The second is civil-military fusion at scale. And the third, the one that genuinely has no American equivalent, is what I call the workforce depth engine. Each of these three forces compounds on the others. Together, they create a shipbuilding machine that is not 10% faster or 20% more efficient than America's. It is operating on a fundamentally different plane of industrial reality. Let me start with the Cascade Model, because this is the one that reframes everything. Here is what nobody tells you about Chinese shipbuilding. The commercial sector is the weapon. When people hear 200 times faster, they picture military dry docks stamping out destroyers. But that is not how this works. China controls, and I mean dominates, the global commercial shipbuilding market. In 2023, Chinese shipyards held 58.4% of all global commercial ship orders by gross tonnage. South Korea held about 21%. Japan around 14%. The United States? It held less than 0.1%. Not a typo. Less than 0.1%. Why does commercial shipbuilding matter for military power? Because it creates what defense economists call a cascading industrial base. Every container ship, every bulk carrier, every LNG tanker that rolls out of Dalian or Jiangnan or Hudong Zhonghua does three things simultaneously. It trains welders, electricians, and engineers in hull construction and outfitting. It sustains the steel supply chains, the component vendors, the electronics integrators that military ships also depend on. And it generates profit that subsidizes overhead costs, meaning military contracts can be fulfilled at lower marginal expense. When I was in Shanghai 2 years ago, I visited a district near the Changxing Island shipyard complex. Within a 15-minute drive, I counted over 40 supplier firms. Valve manufacturers, cable producers, coating specialists, all feeding into the same shipbuilding ecosystem. One factory manager told me they supply parts for both COSCO commercial vessels and plan naval frigates from the same production line. Same workforce, same quality control, same Tuesday. That sentence should stop you cold, because in the United States, the military and commercial shipbuilding industries have almost completely separated. There are exactly 4 shipyards in America capable of building large naval combatants. 4. Huntington Ingalls in Mississippi and Virginia. General Dynamics Bath Iron Works in Maine, and General Dynamics NASCO in San Diego. That is the entire base, and none of them build commercial ships in any meaningful volume. This means every dollar of naval shipbuilding in America carries the full overhead burden. There is no commercial revenue cushion. There is no supply chain cross-pollination. There is no cascading benefit. And that is just the first layer. The second system is even more dangerous because it is the one that turns China's civilian economy into a direct military multiplier. And it is the one that makes most Western defense planners completely underestimate what is coming next. So here is the second force at work, and this one operates on a level that has no real parallel in American defense strategy. It is called civil-military fusion, and while Western analysts have been writing white papers about this concept for years, most of them still dramatically underestimate what it actually looks like on the ground. Let me show you the numbers that matter. China's shipbuilding industry employs roughly 1.88 million workers across its commercial and military yards combined. The United States employs approximately 42,000 in its naval shipbuilding workforce. But the raw headcount is not the real story. The real story is fungibility, the ability to move people, skills, and capacity between civilian and military production almost seamlessly. In 2022, the Center for Strategic and International Studies published a report that included a detail most news outlets completely ignored. During a surge capacity exercise analyzed by Pentagon contractors, Chinese shipyards demonstrated the ability to convert commercial dry docks to military production within a window of roughly 60 to 90 days. Some facilities required even less. The reason is structural. Chinese commercial and military shipbuilding do not just share a workforce. They share design software. They share modular construction techniques. They share steel alloy supply chains. In many cases, they share the same physical berths. Here is what this actually means. If a conflict were to escalate in the Taiwan Strait or the South China Sea tomorrow, China would not need to build a new industrial base. It would simply redirect the one it already has. The commercial order book becomes a strategic reserve. Every container ship contract that gets paused frees up a dry dock, a crane, a team of welders who already know how to lay a keel and fit out a hull. Now contrast that with what would happen on the American side. The U.S. Navy is currently dealing with maintenance backlogs on its existing fleet that stretch, in some cases, over 18 months past schedule. The attack submarine USS Boise went without a scheduled maintenance availability for so long that it was unable to deploy for nearly 5 years. Not because of combat damage, because there was no yard capacity to fix it. A senior defense consultant I spoke with last year put it to me this way, and I will never forget the phrasing. He said, "We don't have a shipbuilding problem. We have a shipbuilding extinction event in slow motion." When I pushed him on what he meant, he explained that the average age of a skilled welder in an American naval shipyard is now over 50. Apprenticeship pipelines have been hollowed out over 3 decades of offshoring and budget sequestration. You cannot write a congressional appropriation that creates a 25-year-old master welder. That takes a decade of training, and the clock has not even started. If you are finding this valuable, hit that like button, because this next piece connects to something even bigger. Here is what makes people uncomfortable. Civil-military fusion is not just a Chinese policy initiative. It is a reflection of something deeper, an industrial philosophy that treats manufacturing capacity as a national security asset, not just an economic output. The United States used to think this way. During World War II, automobile factories became tank factories. Refrigerator plants became ammunition plants. The entire civilian economy was viewed as a convertible strategic reserve. That mindset died somewhere between the end of the Cold War and the rise of shareholder capitalism. American defense became a specialized, contractor-driven, cost-plus ecosystem where 4 or 5 prime contractors build everything, and the commercial industrial base has zero connection to military production. China studied that American history, really studied it, and then they built a 21st century version of it, except instead of converting car factories to tank production, they designed an economy where the conversion is built into the architecture from day one. Let me give you a specific case study that illustrates this perfectly. The Type 054A frigate, a workhorse of the Chinese Navy, uses a diesel engine derived from commercial marine propulsion systems manufactured by firms that also supply China's massive merchant fleet. The hull welding techniques mirror commercial standards. The modular construction blocks are fabricated using the same gantry cranes that build supertankers. Stay with me, because the third system is the one that truly has no American answer. And it is the reason the 200 times faster headline is not an exaggeration. It is actually an undercount. So let me introduce the third force, and this is the one that I believe is the most underappreciated factor in the entire shipbuilding gap conversation. I call it the workforce depth engine, and when you understand how it operates, the 200 times faster comparison stops sounding like clickbait and starts sounding like a conservative estimate. Here is a question nobody seems to be asking. What happens when you need to scale up shipbuilding and there is literally no one left to hire, because that is the exact situation the United States faces right now, today, not in some hypothetical future scenario. Let me show you what this actually looks like in practice. The Bureau of Labor Statistics reported that in 2023, the total number of welders, cutters, solderers, and brazers employed across all American industries was approximately 427,000. That is every welder in every sector: automotive, construction, energy, aerospace, and shipbuilding combined. The subset available for naval shipbuilding is a fraction of that number. Huntington Ingalls alone has reported persistent vacancy rates of between 15 and 20% for skilled trades positions at its Newport News yard. Now here is China's side of the ledger. The Chinese Ministry of Human Resources estimated that in 2022, the country had over 18.7 million workers classified in welding and metal fabrication trades. Not all of them are shipbuilders, obviously. But even a tiny reallocation from that pool, say 2%, would deliver 374,000 workers. That is nearly 9 times the entire American welding workforce across all industries, for just shipbuilding surge capacity. A labor economist I spoke with at a defense conference in Singapore last year described it perfectly. She said, "The U.S. doesn't have a shipbuilding strategy problem. It has a demography meets industrial policy problem. You can't surge a workforce that doesn't exist." Here is the uncomfortable truth. This workforce gap did not happen by accident. It happened by choice. Over the past 40 years, the United States systematically devalued vocational training, manufacturing careers, and trades education. University enrollment was positioned as the only respectable path. Shop classes disappeared from high schools. Apprenticeship programs were gutted. The cultural message was clear: smart people do not weld, they code. China made the opposite bet. The country operates over 11,000 vocational training institutions that feed directly into its manufacturing and shipbuilding sectors. These are not afterthoughts. They are strategically funded, regionally distributed, and explicitly tied to industrial output targets set by the State Council. When CSSC, the China State Shipbuilding Corporation, needs 5,000 new welders, there is a pipeline to deliver them. When Bath Iron Works in Maine needs 500, they run recruiting drives at job fairs and hope for the best. This connects to something even bigger, and I need you to see the full picture. The workforce depth engine does not just affect how many ships China can build, it affects how fast those ships can be repaired, how quickly battle damage can be restored, and how sustainably China can maintain a wartime production tempo. The U.S. War Production Board understood this in 1943. Somehow the lesson was forgotten. Let me give you a number that crystallizes everything. The Congressional Research Service published a report in early 2024 estimating that the United States would need to invest between $25 and $30 billion over 15 years just to restore its naval shipbuilding industrial base to a level capable of meeting current fleet requirements. Not future requirements, not surge requirements. Just the baseline plan of reaching a 381-ship Navy that the Pentagon itself says it needs. And even that estimate assumes workforce pipelines that do not yet exist. It assumes training infrastructure that has not been built. It assumes a cultural shift in how Americans view manufacturing careers that has not even begun. Meanwhile, China launched its third aircraft carrier, the Fujian, in 2022. And satellite imagery analyzed by the Center for Strategic and International Studies showed that a fourth carrier is already under construction at Jiangnan Shipyard in Shanghai. The Fujian was built using an electromagnetic launch system, the same technology the U.S. spent over 20 years and $13 billion developing for the Gerald R. Ford class. China did it faster. China did it cheaper. And China did it while simultaneously building more commercial ships than the rest of the world combined. Now let me pull all three of these systems together, because when you see how they interact, the strategic implications become genuinely alarming. So let me pull this together, because when you see these three systems operating as a single machine, the picture that emerges is not just about ships. It is about the future of global power itself. The Cascade Model means China's commercial shipbuilding dominance directly subsidizes and strengthens its military shipbuilding capacity. Every tanker, every bulk carrier, every container ship is quietly feeding the beast. The civil-military fusion system means the boundary between civilian and military production is not a wall. It is a door that swings open in minutes. And the workforce depth engine means China has a virtually inexhaustible reservoir of trained industrial labor that can be directed toward naval production at a scale the United States cannot match, cannot replicate, and, at current trajectory, cannot even approximate within the next 2 decades. Here is what mainstream defense commentary gets wrong about this entire situation. They frame it as a competition, as if the United States and China are running the same race, and China just happens to be ahead by a few laps. That framing is dangerously misleading. These two countries are not running the same race. They are not even on the same track. China has built an integrated industrial military shipbuilding ecosystem that is structurally, philosophically, and demographically different from anything that exists in the West. When I was in Washington last fall, I sat in on a roundtable with retired naval officers and defense industry executives. The mood in that room was something I had never felt before in those circles. Genuine alarm. Not political alarm, not budget alarm, but existential alarm. One retired rear admiral said something that stuck with me. He said, "We keep talking about the pacing threat, but pacing implies we're in the same race. We're not pacing China. We're watching China from the parking lot." Now let me be clear about something. This does not mean the U.S. Navy is obsolete. American submarines remain the most capable in the world. The Virginia-class attack submarine is a technological marvel. American carrier strike groups still project power in ways no other nation can replicate. Training, doctrine, operational experience, these things matter enormously, and the United States still holds advantages in all of them. But here is the paradox that should define every Pentagon budget conversation for the next 30 years. What good is the most advanced submarine ever built if you cannot build enough of them? What good is unmatched carrier aviation if your fleet is shrinking while your adversary's fleet is doubling? Capability without capacity is a museum piece. It is impressive, it is world-class, and it is insufficient. Let me give you 3 scenarios for how this plays out over the next decade, because the trajectory is not locked in yet. Scenario 1. Managed decline. The United States continues on its current path. Shipbuilding budgets increase modestly. Workforce pipelines remain anemic. The fleet shrinks to roughly 260 to 270 combat vessels by 2035, while China surpasses 450. American naval dominance in the Western Pacific becomes functionally theoretical. Scenario 2. Industrial mobilization. Congress passes emergency legislation modeled on a 21st Century Defense Production Act specifically for shipbuilding, massive investment in vocational training, tax incentives to rebuild the commercial shipbuilding base, partnerships with allied nations, Japan, South Korea, Australia, to create a shared democratic shipbuilding network. This is possible, but would require political will that has not existed since 1945. Scenario 3. Asymmetric pivot. The United States accepts that it will never match China in raw shipbuilding volume and instead doubles down on autonomous systems, unmanned surface vessels, undersea drones, and distributed maritime operations that change the math entirely. Instead of building more ships, you build different ships. Smaller, cheaper, expendable, and lethal. The Navy's Replicator initiative hints at this, but it remains underfunded and bureaucratically constrained. Which scenario plays out depends on decisions being made right now. Not in 2030, not in 2040. Right now. Every year of delay compounds the gap. Every budget cycle that prioritizes legacy platforms over industrial base investment makes the hole deeper. I want to leave you with this thought. The United States did not lose its shipbuilding dominance because China cheated. China simply built the system that America forgot it once had. The arsenal of democracy became the arsenal of nostalgia. And the country that figures out how to build things, real, physical, heavy things, at scale and at speed, is the country that will define the 21st century. If this changed how you think about the naval balance of power, subscribe and turn on notifications. And I want to hear from you in the comments. Do you think America can rebuild its shipbuilding base in time, or has that window already closed? Drop your answer below. I read every single one.